Hi, this is Kat from Bandicoot Design Canberra. Welcome to day 3 for my 100-day project. My project is making 100 different patterned crocheted squares that are going to end up being one very, very large blanket. So today's square is fairly lacy. It's predominantly a mixture of puff stitches with a few double crochets thrown in. So it's, just trying to think. So it starts off with, how's that for being tongue-tied and completely out of it? A lot of double crochets thrown in. So it's very pretty, it's very lacy, and it does some odd things that we had to, or I had to think about, how do we counteract that for putting it into the final blanket, which I will show you after we go through how to make the square. So the other thing with this pattern is that it does some odd things, like counts the original loop, or whether you do a magic circle or a loop, as row 1, which I have never seen any pattern do before. So I'm going to start with a magic circle because that's what I prefer to use. But if you want to do a loop instead, chain 10 and then slip stitch it back to the beginning. Now the round 2, after done the circle, I'm just going to find a stitch marker here. So round 2 is 16 single crochet into your circle or your loop. Hoping this time we get that in. So 2, single crochet, not double. Yeah. Now today I'm not going to change colours on this demonstration square because this pattern in particular is done slightly differently if you change colours at the end of a round to if you continue with the same colour. So for the demonstration I will just stick with the one colour. And it's more in how do you join the rounds at the end and continue on to the next round. So what have we got? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 16. Just double check that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16. So just tighten that. Given the number of stitches that are on this loop, I'm not going to try cinching that entirely closed. It'll just end up bulking out in the middle, so it won't lay flat properly if it does that. And slip stitch back into the first stitch. Now I always use a stitch marker so that I can follow through with my hook where the stitch marker is, and just find that that makes it a bit easier to get into that stitch. Tighten that up. Okay, then the next round, so we're up to round 3. So round 3 is a set of 8 puff stitches and separated by 5 chain stitches. So because it's a puff stitch, I'm going to chain up, now it's double crochet puff stitches, so you want the height of a double crochet. So I'm going to chain up 2. If you want to chain up 3, you can, which is what it has in the pattern. But because it's a puff stitch, it's toggled at the top as a single stitch. I'm not going to do the third chain there because I'm going to treat it as if we've partway done this one and then we're adding the rest on. So to do the puff, pull up a loop through and to the same height as the chain, back through again and pull through your loops. Now there are two different ways that you could make this puff stitch. The correct way is to pull through and leave the last chain on your hook and then pull through again, which works really well if you're going to be stitching into the top of this puff stitch. None of these puff stitches actually have a stitch going into the top of them, so I think it looks better if instead of pulling through to the end and then pulling through two, that you pull through all of the loops and then put in a locking stitch to cinch that tight. Now, it's a bit hard to see on this first stitch, but on the next puff stitch it will be a bit clearer to see. Chain 5, 2, 4, 5, and then we're going to skip a single crochet down here and go into the next one, through, pull up a loop. Now here we don't have chain stitches, so you need to use something to determine what height your loop's going to be. So you can go and maneuver your hook so that you've sort of got it next to the first one as an indicator. You can use your thumbnail, the height of your nail, or something else as a reference point. Or you can just treat it completely as guesswork if you want to. I tend to go back and reference what's approximately the height of the one before. So back through into the same stitch, pull up a loop, and make sure that it comes to the same height, back through, up the loop, and then I'm going to pull through all the all the loops on my hook. The last one could be a little bit tricky. And then cinch that with a locking stitch. And the reason why I prefer this, if you're not having to do a stitch into the top, is that I think it looks neater. It pulls it into a very tight point at the top of that stitch rather than leaving it flat at the top. And often you can end up with the stitch at the top is quite a lot wider. Just said, if you're putting a stitch into that, it's not going to be as much of a problem. But I think if it's not having a stitch in, that this method looks just that bit better. So chain 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, skip a stitch in the circle to the next one, and do the same thing again. So pull through, make sure you get it to the height that you want, over, through again. One more time. The other thing to be aware of when you're doing a puff stitch is to make sure that when your puffs are up, that your hook is parallel with your piece of work, so that your stitches are at a right angle and that they're all the same length. You don't want to have your work off in this direction and your stitches pulled up off at an angle where you've got the first loop on your hook longer than the one at the end of the puff. And then to make sure that these don't get twisted as you pull through, I just hold them in place with my thumb and my middle finger. That through, locking stitch, then chain 5. So that's 3. We need to do that 5 more times. I'll try adding today. And so we're doing it in every second single crochet, do a puff stitch, 5 chain, and I shall meet you when we get back round to the beginning before joining it to the end of the round. Welcome back. So I've just finished the last 5 stitches, or 5 chain stitches, sorry, and I'm going to join it into that first stitch at the beginning of the round. Because this is the top of a puff, you could probably get away without using a stitch marker in this to find it again. Now, if if you were changing colours, you could do that here and finish this round off and then just add on a new colour and start on the next round. But because I'm going to stay with the same colour, next step is to slip stitch in underneath to this 5 chain space, and then the next round is another round of puff stitches. So I'm going to chain up 2, leaving the 3rd stitch undone because they're going to be toggled together anyway. Now this time it goes, your puff stitch doesn't go into a stitch, it goes into the open space. So I'm going to loop down, pull that up, and you want to try and make sure that you keep this gap fairly small when you're doing that so that the loops don't spread down your chain too far. That one through, loop. Now, locking stitch in place. Then on this round, we're going to chain 4 instead of chaining 5. 2, 3, 4. And the next puff stitch is going to go into the same 5 chain space from the round below. So in, pull up, and this is where you're going to have to work out a method of judging what height to pull it up. Pull up again, one more, up. Now I did try a couple of different ways of doing this round, including doing it into the chain stitches, and that just became extremely difficult to do and really fiddly, and it's supposed to be a relatively easy pattern, so doing that just seemed to be counterproductive. To chain 4, sorry, 3, 4. The alternative to doing puff stitches here is, if you're not comfortable with doing a puff stitch, is to do a toggle 3 double crochet together. So you do, I'll just show you on the next one. So instead of a puff stitch, you could start with a double crochet, pull through 2 loops, leave the last 2 on the hook, do that again, pull through 2, 1 more, pull through 2, and pull through all 4 loops on the hook, which will give you a toggle treble 3 double crochet toggled together, and it will look different. It will still look good, but it will look different to using the puff stitches, so that you could do as an alternative if you're not comfortable with puff stitches. Just going to go back to the loops. So it's the same in the next one, so puff stitch, that's not the right height, through and add in a locking stitch, chain 4, 2, 3, 4, and then a second puff stitch into the same chain section of chain. So in, over, one more, right in place, pull through all the loops and lock that in place, then chain 4, 3, 4, and I'm just going to show so you can see where that's starting to. So to finish this round, you just continue that all the way around in each of the 5 chain spaces below. Do a puff stitch of 4 chains, second puff stitch, 4 chains, and move into the next space. So I'm going to finish doing this round and I will meet you back at the beginning. Okay, so we're now at the last set of 4 chains, and I'm going to slip stitch that back into the beginning of the round. And again, if you were changing colours, you'd do that here and finish off this end and then attach on another colour. Because I'm continuing on in the same colour, I'm going to slip stitch in under to the next space, and this time we're going to, actually before I start on that, let's have a look and see what it looks like. So the end of round 3, you should have 2 rounds of puff stitches. So there's 8 in the central round, 16 puff stitches on the second outside round. So the next round, so round 4 is where we, sorry, not round 4, round 5 is where we start taking this from being a circle into a square. As I said, we're going to slip stitch so that you're into the first chain space. But this time, instead of chaining up for a puff stitch, you're going to chain 1. Now this isn't going to count as a stitch. It's just so that you get up to the height to then do a single crochet in the same space. And this wool is splitting really badly on me today. So single crochet into that space, chain 2, and then we do the first of the corners into the next chain space. It's 2 double crochet, 2, 2, chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and then another 2 double crochet into the same space. Now after that, chain 2, 1, 2, then single crochet to anchor that into the next chain space. So you've moved that along 1, and then you can see that that gives you the first of your corners. So from that, then chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, single crochet into the next chain space, chain 5, 3, 4 and 5, single crochet into the next chain space, then chain 2, 2, and then we do another corner in the next chain space. So 2 double crochet, so 1, 2, sorry, pull through 2, that's the second one, chain 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2 more double crochet, 1, 2, chain 2, and anchor that with a single crochet into the next chain space. I'll show you what that looks like. So that is giving you 2 corners and 1 side, or the start of 2 corners and a side. So from here you do 5 chain, single crochet to the next chain space, chain 5 again, and a single crochet into the next chain space, chain 2, 2 double crochet, chain 5, and 2 double crochet for the next corner, and then the same on the next one around. And if you continue there with that, I will meet you back around before we join it to the beginning. And this time the join is going to be slightly different. Okay, so I've just done the first of the 5 chains on this last side before we join it to the beginning. Now if we were changing colours, you could just chain 5, join it into this stitch here, finish off this colour and start with a new one. But because again I'm staying with the same colour, if I do 5 chains, I'm going to end up with my hook down here rather than at the top of the loop. So instead we need to chain 2 and then do a double crochet into the first stitch to join this round together. 2, and that then ends up with your hook being at the top of this loop for the next row. So I'm just going to remove that stitch marker, and the beginning of this row is the same. You're going to chain 1 and then do a single crochet into the same space, into the same place as well. So chain 1, single crochet 1. Then for this is round 6, the chain 5, 1, 3, 4 and 5, and we're going to start really working on and emphasizing these corners. So you're going to skip the next chain space, skip your 2 double crochet, and into the chain space of the corner double crochet 5, or 5 double crochet. 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just going to move those down a little bit. Then chain 5, 1, 4 and 5. I'm just going to move, there's a bit of grass in that wool by the looks of it. And then another 5 double crochet into the same corner space. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's that one. Then chain 5 again. 2, 3, 4 and 5. And then again we're going to skip these 2 double crochet and the 2 chain space, going directly into this first 5 chain space with a single crochet, chain 5, 2, 3, 4 and 5, into the next 5 chain space with a single crochet, then chain 5, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and again skip the first 2 chain space and the 2 double crochet, and going into the 5 chain space in the corner, do 5 double crochet, 1, 2, 3, 5, chain 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 5 more double crochet into the same corner space. Hoping I'm not moving too fast for you. The day 2 video was absolutely ridiculously long, which it kind of needed to be because there were quite a few techniques and technicalities in how to do the day 2 square. But it was still very, very long, and I'm trying to make this video just that bit shorter. So if I am going too fast, I do apologize, and let me know in the comments that it was too fast and I'll slow down again. So 5, so that's that corner, chain 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then skip the double crochet, skip the 2 chain space, and anchor that into the 5 chain space with a single crochet. So we've done 2 corners and a side. I'm just going to give you this so far. So we'll, from here, need to do 5 chains, anchor that in with a single crochet into the next 5 chain space, another 5 chains, and then into this chain space in the corner, 5 double crochet, chain 5, 5 more double crochet, and then continue that around, and I will meet you back at the end of this round. Hey, welcome back. So I'm now almost at the beginning of this round again. So I've just done the last corner, chained 5, and anchored that with a single crochet into the 5 chain space. Now again, if you were changing colors, you could just do 5 chain stitches, finish off this color by joining it to the beginning of the round, cut that off, and then add on a new color. Alternately, if you're continuing with the same color, chain, get the stitch marker out of the way, chain 2, and then do a double crochet into the first stitch of the round. To the beginning, so that you end up with your hook at the top of that loop instead of down in this corner. So where are we up to? Round 7. Round 7? Yes, round 7. So same start as before, chain 1, which isn't counting as a stitch in this pattern. Just put my stitch marker in and a single crochet in place. Then from here, just let me do a quick double check to make sure. Okay, so from here, I'm going to chain 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Single crochet into the 5 chain space. Then crochet, 2 chain stitches. So 1, 2. And then in the corner, sorry, I'm knocking that tripod a little bit, into this corner, you're going to do a single double crochet into each of the 5 double crochet from the round below, and then 4 double crochet into the chain space. So we start with 1 into the top of the next one, into the next one, that's the 5 into your double crochet, so then it's 4 more into the chain space, so 1, oops, with all there, 2, 3, 4, smooth those down a bit, chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then we're going to do the same on the other half of this corner, so chain 4, sorry, not chain 4, double crochet 4 into the chain space, 1, 2, 3, set up a bit, and 4, 1 double crochet into each of the double crochet stitches in the round below, so you end up with 1, oops, 2, 3, 4, and 5, chain 2, 2, anchor that to the 5 chain space, chain 5, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then anchor that with a single crochet into the next 5 chain space, chain 5 again, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, single crochet into the next chain 5 space, chain 2, and then you're back at the next corner, and so you'll repeat what you did on the first one. Just move that way. So it will be a double crochet into each of the double crochet in the round below, 4 double crochet into the corner, chain stitch 5, 4 more double crochet into that corner space, and then a double crochet into the top of each of these 5 double crochet, chain 2, anchor into the first chain space, the single crochet, chain 5, anchor into the next chain space with a single crochet, chain 5 again, which will get you to just before your double crochets, anchor that with a single crochet, and then here we're back to the corners, which will repeat. So if you keep doing that, and I shall meet you just before we join this round together. Okay, so we're almost back at the beginning. I've done the last corner, anchored that into the chain space, chain 2, and because I'm continuing with this colour, I'm going to use a double crochet to join that to the beginning of the round. But if you were changing colours here, you could chain 5 and join it to the round that way, and then just cut off that thread and start with a new colour. Okay, so we're up to, actually I'll show the square first before we start do any more. So you can already see this square's got very flared out corners, and it pulls in quite a lot into the middles. Now the next round will decrease some of that, but it won't do it entirely. And so far this is the first square in my blanket that I've actually needed to block at the end to pull this center out. And as I'll show you when I get to the end of this video, I had to make some adjustments in the corners to be able to make these corners fit into the rest, or fit to the rest of the blanket. But that's okay, it's good. So for the last round, so round 8, let's do almost the same thing. I'm going to chain 1, which is not counting as a stitch, and single crochet in the same place. Because this is the last round, we're just edging off this lattice work and adding some edge work or some patterning onto the outside of these corners. So we're not chaining 5 this time, we're only going to chain 3, 2 and 3, single crochet into the next chain space, and chain 3, 1. Now into these corners we're going to change things up a little bit. So instead of doing a double crochet into every double crochet stitch in the corner, we're only doing a double crochet into every second stitch. So starting at the beginning, into the first stitch, it's a single double crochet, chain 1, skip a double crochet in the row below, and then a double crochet into the next stitch, chain 1, then do the same, skip the next one, double crochet into the one after that, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet into the next stitch, chain 1, skip 1, and the last double crochet here should be into the last double crochet of the round below. So you should have 5 double crochet stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's 4 double crochet into the corner space. 1, 2, 3, and 4, chain 2, and then another 4 double crochet into the same space. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to do this fillet stitch again. So a double crochet into the first double crochet in the round below, chain 1, skip 1, a double crochet into the next stitch, chain 1, skip the next stitch, double crochet into the one after, chain 1, keep doing that, skip 1, double crochet into the next, chain 1, and then we should skip 1, should take us to the last double crochet in that corner, chain 3, so oops, a bit loose there, 1, 2, and 3, and then skip to the next 5 chain space, a single crochet, chain 3, 2, 3, single crochet into the next 5 chain space, chain 3, 2, 3, and we're onto the second corner, which will be the same as the first. So from there, put this out, along this row of double crochets into the corner will be a double crochet into the first, chain 1, skip a stitch, double crochet into the second, so that you get this fillet stitch going through until you get to the last double crochet in on that side of the corner. Then it will be 4 double crochet into the corner space, chain 2, 4 more double crochet into the corner space, and then back down in on this side of the corner it will be a double crochet into the first stitch, chain 1, skip the next double crochet, and double crochet into the third stitch to get the fillet stitch along the end, and continue that all the way around until we get back to the beginning. And this time when we get back to the beginning, after your chain 3 from the last double crochet here, it's a simple slip stitch to join the last end of the round, last stitch of the round, and I will meet you back there. Welcome back. I'm just finishing off the last of the fillet stitches into this final corner, so double crochet into that, then chain 3, 2, 3, and then just slip stitch on this last round straight into the stitch at the beginning of the round. Just remove the stitch marker from there, pull that through. So I'm just gonna, when I've got a bit of thread there. So when you've finished, you should have, it's very, very lacy, and it's really pretty square, but it will need a little bit of blocking, and I'll put a photo on. For those of you who've looked at my blog site, you'll see an image of the square where I have blocked it, and I'll put that photo up at the end of this footage. But it also had to be adjusted in the corners to fit with the rest of the blanket. So that's the original square in its finished state, and I don't have a name. Do I have a name for this square? I don't believe I do have a name for this square, but I will have all of the links to the square and to my blog site and the Pinterest boards down in the description below. So what we'll look at, just to finish off with, is how this square had to be adjusted, particularly at these corners, to make it fit into the right size, or to make it the right size for the rest of this blanket. So, I'm sorry, I'm knocking the tripod here. So to fit this blanket, the square needs to be 20 centimeters across and down before I add on this edging border. And before I made some adjustments to it, it was just a little bit bigger than that. It was actually quite a bit bigger than that, because whilst it fit nicely in the center, these corners, I'll show up the top, flared out. So if I move that up, we're up like this. So there was about an extra 1.5 centimeters flaring out at the corners, making it much too big. So even though there was nothing wrong with the stitch count, it was the right number of stitches, the square itself needed to be adjusted. So to do that, when I added on the border rounds, so the first round for the border rounds is just a single crochet on this square, because it didn't need to be bigger. I needed to make it smaller, but it didn't need to be bigger. So it's just single crochet. And then in the corner sections where all these double crochets are, I've worked in the back post. So I've done a single crochet into the back post. So what happens by doing that is it shortens the length of these stitches, and it gives it this nice little ridge coming up here. So I don't know how well you can see that in the light. So it gives it this ridge coming through here and coming down here. So it sort of makes it stand up at a right angle to itself. And it makes that shorter on both of the corners, and when you do it all around each of the corners, it made it a little squarer. And by the time I now stitch this or join this to the squares that I've already made, it should have enough tension in them to pull this centerpiece out so that it is square and it sits flush and it sits properly. So that is the square pattern for day 2. Sorry, no, it's not. It's the square pattern for day 3. It's getting late. I hope that you enjoy making the pattern. As I said, if you don't feel comfortable with a puff stitch, change these into center stitches to a toggle 3 double crochet together instead. There's nothing that says you have to do a puff stitch if you don't like doing puff stitches, or if you don't feel comfortable doing them. You can modify any pattern you come across. So I hope you found the video helpful and that you learned something. If you did learn something and found the video useful, please click on the like button, and if you want to continue watching the videos, please hit the subscribe button. This was day 3 of the 100-day project, so there are 97, I just double check my adding, it's late, 97 different pattern squares remaining to go in this series. I hope you have a great day. Enjoyed having you with me. Oh, and Jack, he's been very quiet the last couple of videos. Jack says hello and goodbye as well.